Welcome to the Customer Wins Podcast, where business leaders discuss their secrets and techniques for helping their customers succeed and in turn grow their business.
Hi, I'm Rich Walker, the host of the Customer Wins, where I talk to business leaders about how they help their customers win and how their focus on customer experience leads to growth. Some of my past guests have included Eden Ovadia of Finney, Ian Carnell of Vast Advisor, and Chirag Gandhi of Millie. Today is a special episode in my series on governance, risk, and regulation, and today's guest is David Reeve, founder and CEO of InvestorCom. And today's episode is brought to you by Quick, the leader in enterprise forms processing. When your business relies upon processing forms, don't waste your team's valuable time manually reviewing the forms. Instead, get Quick. Using Quick, you'll be able to generate completed forms and get back clean, context-rich data that reduces manual reviews to only 1 out of 1,000 submissions. Visit quickforms.com to get started. Now, before I introduce today's guest, I want to give a big thank you to Param Nasseri, who is a personal friend of mine and also the president of InvestorCom and a prior guest on my show. Go look his show up. He was great. But today, we have David Reeve, the founder and CEO of InvestorCom. Over the last 30 years, InvestorCom has built long-term partnerships with global wealth management leaders. From 1984 to 1992, David held a variety of marketing leadership roles at IBM Canada, and his expertise is in building enterprise partnerships in the wealth management industry focused on technology innovation. Dave, welcome to the Customer Wins.
Thanks so much, Rich. I've watched your podcast with great interest. I'm super honored to be part of it and thrilled to join you today.
Well, I'm happy to have you here. We're going to have a really good conversation. So for my audience, if you haven't heard my podcast before, I love to talk to business leaders about what they're doing to help their customers win, how they've built and deliver a great customer experience, and the challenges to growing their own company. So Dave, let's understand your business a lot better. How does your company help people?
Well, Rich, I think there's kind of many different vectors to answer that question, but I would say the very first thing that comes to mind is simplicity. Our clients are wealth advisors, wealth firms, and their advisors. And, one of the big challenges in the tech industry is adoption of technology. And so, we've really focused on 2 words, and those 2 words are proudly simple. What we want to do is deliver technology. And, often our clients are using our tech to perform a compliance function, which doesn't fall in the fun category. And so this notion of proudly simple is absolutely essential. And we are, hawks on how do we continue to simplify our platform to make it easy for advisors. And frankly, they give us the feedback that I think we're doing a pretty decent job there.
Oh, that is awesome. So I don't know if you know this, my company name is actually Efficient Technology, Inc. And our product is Quick. We are all about how do we make things intuitive and simple and fast and easy. So I have a great affinity for what you're doing. Before I dive further into the simple idea and how you actually execute on that, your customer, is it the wealth management firm, the advisor, is it the end client? Is it all the above?
It really is all the above. I mean, the people that actually pay for our software are wealth firms. But we very much look at advisors. There's 50,000 advisors on our platform now. So we look at, every single one of those folks as our clients as well. And frankly, the real value that's being delivered is to the investor. And so, we think of all 3 of those folks as being our clients, even though it's the wealth firm that typically pays our bill.
But who actually sees the product, like uses it? Is it the advisor or the compliance team or?
Well, again, all 3 parties. To the advisor is the main user. So the UI sits on the advisor's desktop. And again, going back to simple, we want to make that interaction as simple as possible. A lot of what we do, though, Rich, involves disclosure to a client. So for example, we were talking a little bit earlier about rollovers. If you compliantly recommend a rollover to a client, you have to deliver disclosure. So that piece actually touches the investor. And then, there's a huge supervisory and compliance practice where our dashboards are used by the wealth firm. And so, really our technology touches, all 3 of those stakeholders.
Okay. I was asking this because if we're going to talk about simplicity, you have a lot of eyeballs to appeal to. And what I really want to drive into, Dave, is what is it? I mean, you can't just say, I want simple. What are the core philosophies, the core instincts, the guiding principles of your firm that enable you to actually achieve simplicity?
It's a really, really good question. I remember someone saying, if I had more time, I'd write you a postcard. Simple is difficult. By the way, one of the reasons we use the word proudly is that, sometimes people perceive simplicity is not comprehensive or not complete or not complex enough. And so, when we talk about proudly simple, we know it's a heck of a lot more. You know this in your business. It's a heck of a lot more work to do things simply than complex, certainly when you're rolling out technology. But I will say, we're all kind of entering or have entered this AI phase, which will even help us with this sort of simplicity goal. But I would say a couple of things. For the advisor, we want to minimize the number of clicks to perform a function. And I remember we were pitching to one of the absolute top wealth firms, and we were so proud telling this particular individual that it was only 2 clicks to compliance. And I'll never forget, he said, "That's great, Dave. We want 0 clicks." And of course, in the world of AI, we'll all be there at some point in time. The other area on the simplicity front is some of our competitors deliver disclosures, which are part of the compliance process to an investor that could be 100 pages. And so we're very, very focused on page count, readability, legibility, understandability. And listen, we all know as consumers of compliance, most people don't read things. But ultimately, we design our disclosures so that they're really sales documents to help our advisors be more successful. And again, simplicity is our mantra there as well.
I love that concept. If you can help it as part of the sales process to get it across, yeah, you're delivering. Because my gosh, my advisor, I get the prospectuses, great, throw them in the trash. You've got to read this notice, privacy. Yeah, I hired you guys because you're going to keep my data private, right? I'm not going to read that. And it's a struggle, but we're obligated to have those things put out there so that we can say we are compliant, right? Are you doing anything to engage the end investor in a way that proves compliance?
Well, a lot of the disclosure that our clients actually receive, they have to acknowledge, before the actual transaction proceeds. So again, I'll go back to rollovers, which, rolling your retirement assets out of a 401k into an IRA may be the most important or significant decision an investor makes. And so in order for that to be a successful event, the investor really has to acknowledge that rollover recommendation is in her best interest. And so there is, really a kind of response mechanism. And some of our clients, Glenn, the client in this case being the wealth firm, are expecting that there's a response in the form of a DocuSign or digital signature acknowledging that. So absolutely, the investor is absolutely key in this process because she really needs to agree to proceed before the advisor can move on.
Yeah, yeah. All right, you said this, like AI is simplifying things in certain ways. I think AI is introducing a whole lot of different types of risks that we have to pay attention to. One of the ones that I was just talking about this at lunch is that you take somebody who's not a technologist, who doesn't think about SOC 2 compliance or the regulatory pressures on the system, the technology, and they just design a system. They just, hey, go build me a system. How are you guys addressing that kind of, let's go really fast, but we got to put all the compliance pieces in place too, and managing that balance with AI?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it's one that I can't completely answer. I don't know if anyone can completely answer that today because that market is evolving so rapidly. Like, kind of think about pre-Claude, and we were all amazed, and Chat GPT was helping us do our jobs, and then all of a sudden comes this kind of vibe coding technology, and it changed the world again. I would say this, that we need to be extremely careful about what data we do and what data we do not inject into our AI platform. And so, again, our business manages, several $100 billion of rollovers on behalf of our clients. And so it's really, really important that we leverage AI to make those systems faster, easier, more, easier to comprehend. But some data can be fed into the AI model. A lot of data cannot. For example, all the book of record information will not be fed in. And, you and I have heard lots about the businesses that are going to be marginalized by AI, and there are definitely those horizontal businesses. But when you have a verticalized business like we do that has critical PII data and book of record data, you have to be awfully selective about what you would and would not, leverage into an AI model.
Well, yeah, because we have regulatory pressure. We have government entities telling us what we can and cannot do, at least in terms of penalties and fines if we do it wrong. So we have to adhere to certain types of standards and rules. And so that leads me to thinking about a question my CTO asked last summer. And it was really a couple of questions in a series. One was, what's the definition of a software engineer if we have AI? Like, what's the role going to become? But the other one was, if I have engineers building products with AI, how do I govern them? How do I ensure quality? How do I ensure they're following a certain standard and a set of rules? And I think that applies to AI in general. So are you guys thinking about that? Like, do you use AI with a certain type of boundary or rule set around it or guidelines around it in your product or in your services? And it's just something you're evolving to.
Yeah. Well, I think, and you asked the first question, will AI replace the world of software development? I think it will replace a portion of the world of software development. The kind of the junior level coding function that now is automated. I think ultimately, and I've got 3 children in technology who are, very keen in the world of development. What I sort of see happening is that the function of software development and the function of product management, I think, will merge a little bit. I mean, it's absolutely incredible if one of our clients, gives us a wish list of integrations that they want to see, and we just, this happens on a weekly basis. I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, Rich, that would take us 2 months to take away, develop massive amount of resources. In many cases, you just wouldn't do it. Whereas
Right.
now that can be a 3 or 4 hour activity, and you're coming back to the client and saying, is this really what you're thinking about? So, I think that merging of product and software development is really, really interesting, and I think will feed a immense amount of creativity into the development function, and I think that's super exciting for the function. On your second question, how do you make sure that AI quality is high enough? Frankly, I think the answer is AI, because so much of the quality assurance, or even using AI to look into any bugs or defects in software, it just is it's as that's a bit of a needle in a haystack activity, kind of like compliance. Just the ability to fast forward and use technology versus a human brain to do QA to find any issues is a real win. I think ultimately it requires kind of human analysis to make the final call, but the ability to find that needle in the haystack, to me, is such a massive win, and ultimately will drive a higher level of quality in the software that's being released.
Yeah, I have a hard time thinking we're not going to have humans in the loop in a lot of these really high quality outcomes that we're looking for.
I agree.
And I know the AI is getting more and more sophisticated, but it's still limited by the context. It's limited by what you inform it with, and it's limited by how you want it to behave. One of the things I've noticed is that AI often is seeking the fastest solution. Is that the best solution? That depends on your perspective, but I think in certain cases it's not. So you have to kind of guide it in certain ways to break its normal behavior to perform the way you want it to perform. When your customer said to you, "We want 0 clicks," was that an AI answer, or is that a deterministic answer you could provide?
That was a question we were asked 3 years ago. Long before kind of any ambient advisor technology was even considered. But I'll never forget it, because we were so proud of 2 clicks compared to I think our competitors might have been 10 clicks. So we were just so proud of that. it was quite a, kind of slap in the face to say, can you do zero? But you know what, Rich, it's really interesting. We just had a board meeting a month ago where we presented our long-term AI strategy, and that's exactly where it's going, to zero clicks. That, you've got all of these conversations, whether they be telephone, email, text conversations that are now consolidated into an AI model. And the advisor will just not be as required. I think the advisor will always be required to review the content, but rather than going through a complex application, she can now just review what the AI model has created. And yeah, whether we get to zero clicks, I think that's I think that's the right moonshot for sure. But I mean, to me, external AI is all about, in our world, driving advisor productivity, and I think it goes to an infinite level of improvement.
You're implying something that I think is really fascinating about the age we're in with AI. So forgive me, how long have you had your company?
Well, the company has been around for 34 years, and so I'm showing my ripeness there for sure. But to be honest with you, Rich, we've been in the U.S. market for 5 years, and we've been a pure SaaS business for about the same period of time. So, of course, a 3-decade-old business goes through a bunch of different chapters and transformations. And I kind of think of our business as being more of a decade-old business, but we have been around since 1992.
So the reason I'm asking, I mean, my company's at year 24. And I think in order to last decades, you have to keep reinventing yourself. You have to change your business models, your practices, your infrastructure, your technology footprint, your innovation, your vision, all of it. It's a metamorphosis. It just keeps unfolding and folding. But what you were implying, I think what you were talking about just a minute ago, in my view, is AI is forcing so many of us, maybe all of us, have to reconsider and reframe what our businesses are and should become. Because if you were given the hard question 3 years ago that you couldn't solve, and now AI is saying, hey, maybe it is possible to solve it, the only way to get there is to completely change how you view what you do. Internally, are you guys going through that? Am I seeing this right?
We are totally going through it, and it's an interesting exercise, and it's mostly fun and exciting, but it's not fun and exciting for everyone. So I think you really have to, from a leadership standpoint, take the approach that some people will grasp and run with it. Other people kind of need to be helped along the way. So I think our team's doing an absolutely exceptional job on internalizing AI. And what that essentially means for us is just faster development. Our releases are just happening at a much higher pace, kind of similar to the example that I gave you. And then onboarding is dramatically faster in our business as well. So, that kind of internal opportunity, I think hopefully most firms are grasping that today. I also think that, it really, really supports young people in the business as well. You've got so many digital natives. The reality is there are not hordes of, AI experts out there for any of us to hire. So really, bringing in young people that are just digital by nature is really wonderful, which I love. Kind of going back to, our long business tenures. I mean, the joy of working with and developing young people is such a wonderful thing. But listen, I would say AI is just going to accelerate that for sure.
Yeah. I heard some interesting stats. I don't know how true they are or how relevant they are at this moment, but to share what I heard, somebody said only 16% of the human population is really using AI at all, has been introduced to it. It's still a massive amount of people who have not used AI. Maybe some never will. And out of that population, less than 2% really even understand how to use AI. And 0.5% are using it for software development.
That's interesting.
Which seems astounding to me.
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't heard that. I had dinner on Friday with a group of business friends, and the subject was AI, and there was an AI expert that led the conversation, and he sort of gave the very opposite view that, by 2035, 98% of functions will be performed by robots and by AI. So he's taking kind of the extreme, we'll call it perhaps the Elon Musk extreme view of where AI is going to lead us. we have a long way to go to get there. But when you think about it, commercial AI, and again, think about Claude Code as being a whole new generation of AI. It really has not been on the market for long at all. So, not surprising that we're seeing that degree of adoption. I mean, a flip side of that, Rich, could be you could say that's just massive adoption in a short period. Because when you look at other forms of significant technology transformation, really in the last century, it's taken a lot longer, really, to be adopted than AI has in the last year or so.
Yeah, and look, I'm also in a vacuum echo chamber, as I'm around a lot of entrepreneurs and business
Yeah.
leaders and technologists, and so this is what we all talk about, obviously. But you get out in the real world and talk to others, they're like, "What? It can do what? How?" And so I do think some of those stats are meaningful, but it also points to what you were saying. Like, you can't just go out and hire the person who knows everything about AI. They're very rare to do it. So getting a younger generation in who can learn it faster than the rest of us, who can dedicate their time and their brains more wired to it, I think is a really savvy idea. Um, I want to go back to a little bit more in terms of compliance. Where does your product focus on compliance? Like advertising compliance, surveillance and reviews? What are you guys doing?
Our products, so we've got a whole platform that support, I'll call it pre-trade compliance in the wealth management world. And pre-trade is just something that's evolved with most Western regulators in the last 5 or 10 years, where they say, doing post-trade compliance isn't good enough. You need to perform these, pieces of analysis to essentially ensure that it's in the investor's best interest. The one area that I'll just speak to, and I could go on a bunch of things we do, but this $1 trillion that's rolling from 401ks to IRAs, I mean, that's a very compliance-focused event. And so what our software ensures is that the advisor, when recommending a rollover to the investor, has performed all the required function, comparing cost, comparing service, comparing fit, and then providing kind of that data for the firm to be able to put some guardrails around what should and shouldn't be approved from a rollover perspective. So, this is a super regulated function that we're focused on, notwithstanding a deregulatory agenda, broadly in the industry. It's still, it's got a very bright light on it because you're often rolling out of a 401k that is low to no fee into an IRA that's much higher fee. And so, we've got to ensure that's in the investor's best interest before that happens. And so, it's a thorough analysis. Again, we have to do it in a simple manner, but you have to, tick a bunch of boxes to ensure that you perform that analysis and ensure that disclosure goes to the client. So that's really our focus and part of the business that we're really expanding quite rapidly.
Well, yeah, if $1 trillion is going to roll over every year, that's massive, massive growth opportunity for advisors. Right. I mean, we talked about the generational wealth transfer. Is that part of it? Is that what is causing it, is these rollovers?
Well, I think, a lot of rollovers are driven by demographics. So yes, is it caused by the intergenerational wealth transfer? No, but are both factors driven by demographics? Yes. And so, you've got an aging population. You've got, a lot of underserved investors as well. So the government is, looking at, different regulatory kind of initiatives to ensure that we've got a better served population from a retirement standpoint. And so, I think demographics drive, a lot of these factors. The intergenerational wealth transfer, I think, is a huge, huge issue facing the industry. I mean, one of the pieces of data that we all know is that our children are not likely to be served by the financial advisors that serve us. And in many cases, that's really the issue of the advisor who's not, really investing in relationships with that next generation. So it's a super complex issue. But interestingly, what we need to do is make advisors, you've got all that happening. Meanwhile, you've got a huge depopulation of advisors as, aging advisors age out, and not a lot of, I don't know about the young people, not a lot of young people are becoming financial advisors. So there's a real need in the industry to make those advisors more productive so that they can, serve a greater number of investors. I think we all know by now that robo is not going to eliminate
Yeah.
the advisor. It's going to make advisors more effective. But that comes back to how do you put technology in the hands of advisors to allow them to serve twice as many, three times, four, five times as many clients and do it in an effective manner. And these are all generational wealth transfer, the kind of retirement anxiety and how to solve for that, and a declining advisor population. And you and I both know technologies in the vortex of all of those issues for sure.
Yeah. I don't want to go back to AI too much. I always do actually. The robo advisor idea really would have been different if it was robo AI. But even then, I think AI is lacking the human capacity that we seek in our advisors, in our relationships. So it is an interesting time. And funny enough, when I was an advisor, I joined my mentor in his business, and he wanted me to come in and buy him out over 5 years and take over his clients and work with their children. So I was too young to understand the clients. I didn't have kids. I didn't have kids going through college. I wasn't at retirement age. I didn't have the kind of wealth they did, all that. But then I didn't like their kids. That was the other funny thing. Like, how are we going to keep their kids if I don't even like working with them because they're different mindset, different ideas, et cetera? You know what we need, Dave? We haven't had a good movie out to prop up Wall Street and make it look sexy. I mean, go back to the 80s with Gecko Gordon. I mean, it's just not that glorified anymore. So how do we attract more people into this industry and help it grow that way?
It's, I think of the financial advisors who are my age and stage in their career. They've got some of the best careers of anyone. I mean, they completely control their flexibility. It's a great, wealth creation model for them. I remember when one of my kids was kind of revisiting her career journey, and I mentioned investment advisor to her, and it's kind of like mentioning life insurance or something. So I agree with you that I think as human contribution towards helping people manage wealth effectively is more recognized, and sort of call it that empathy EQ thing that will never be automated. As that's more valued, I think perhaps there's an opportunity to create more of a career path, because I think it's a fabulous career. It's a really important societal contribution. And yet, it seems a little bit out of fashion in the course of the last decade or so. But, I think that'll reverse as opportunities present themselves for sure.
I think so. I also feel like the younger generation cares more about people than we ever have.
Yeah.
And so why wouldn't they want this calling? Why wouldn't they want to be part of, this kind of world? There's one other thing I'm going to present to you, because I've been hearing this more and more. I'm hearing more firms talk about organic growth versus acquisitional growth. Yeah, there's always mergers and acquisitions. That's always a case. But I'm just stunned by how many people I've met in the industry, talked to in the industry, where the words are really about how do I enable more organic growth? What do you think the answer is to that?
Well, organic growth, we know, is always the best growth. You probably know that in your business. I know that in my business. You can acquire stuff, but the value of growing organically is great. The problem is it's a bit slow. And by the way, organic growth rates in wealth are anemic. They're 3 or 4%. Of course, you've got higher performers, but generally speaking, it's extremely low. I mean, we happen to be focused on the biggest organic growth opportunity, not in the next 5 years, in the next 2 or 3 decades, which is driven by this notion of rolling assets from a non-advised entity called a 401k into an advised entity, and all the reasons why that's more important to the investor. We just talked about around empathy and guiding. It's not about better stock picking. It's just about having human advice beside you. And so that's a massive growth opportunity. And yet, it's a growth opportunity that traditionally has been full of friction through the process. So I was just speaking to a wealth executive this morning who, they've kind of given up on rollovers as an opportunity, until I took her through the math that said 1,500 advisors, 20 rollovers a year, which is the average, 300,000 average role, it's $9 billion in assets that you'll add to your firm. So, I think some of it is getting refocused around organic growth. I think inorganic growth, M&A growth, is expensive. It obviously has cycles. And so, listen, I think a lot of firms will kind of reorient their business around organic growth. And one of the biggest opportunities happens to be this rollover piece, which we're very lucky to be at the center of right now.
Yeah. And if you can create less friction in the process, make it easier, or as I say, remove roadblocks in the process, that's going to make it easier for everybody. Dave, I'm getting to the end, so I have to wrap this up. I really enjoyed talking to you about this. Before I get to my very last question, what is the best way for people to find and connect with you?
Well, we're super active on LinkedIn, Rich, and we've just surpassed 4,000 followers, which we're proud of. So InvestorCom on LinkedIn, there's a ton of thought leadership. Our team does a really exceptional job, and Parham, as you mentioned him earlier, leads that effort. So please follow us, and we've got lots of action on LinkedIn. I personally am pretty active on LinkedIn. My email address, dreeve@investorcom.com. Our website as well, investorcom.com, is a great way to find us. And I would say the number one channel that we focus on is LinkedIn.
Nice. That's awesome. It's good success there. All right. I always say this question to the end because it's one of my favorites. Who has had the biggest impact on your leadership style and how you approach your role today?
Oh, that's such a good question because, at my stage, there's so many people that you've learned from. I would say the one person, I started my career at IBM. I don't know if you've ever heard of that company, but it used to be the large, I'm kidding. But IBM used to be the current, Amazon or Meta. And so I started my career there. And I had a boss at IBM. His name was Harry Winder. He's no longer with us, which is very sad. He was quite a guy. But he was an incredible balance of a leader that always put the customer first. And he was just an amazing guy in that regard. And but he also was so supportive of his team members. And running a big corporation, there were lots of politics. And I'll just remember how he would sort of fast forward through customer issues or internal corporate issues and just kind of always do the right thing. So just his simplicity. He's also just a great guy, and would be a bit of a backslapping guy. But he was a wonderful man and a great mentor to me.
I share this with you because my mentor was an IBM executive.
Come on.
Yeah, 30 years plus at IBM, a lifer at IBM. He ended up doing the global business planning for IBM. And then I met him when he took over a subsidiary that he negotiated the purchase of and then became the leader of it. Yeah. It's so fascinating what we've lost touch with that IBM represented back in the 80s and 90s,
Yeah. Man. Yeah. Well, certainly that sort of corporate commitment towards longevity, and young people often view kind of 3 or 4 years as being like we viewed 10 or 15 years, but that's a two-way street. And IBM was a great example of that. And I cheer that company on whenever I see them in the news because I have such great memories, and that's a small world.
Yeah. All right, I got to wrap this up. So I want to give a big thank you to David Reeve, founder and CEO of InvestorCom, for being on this episode of The Customer Wins. Go check out his website at investorcom.com. And don't forget to check out Quick at quickforms.com, where we make processing forms easy. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. We'll click the like button, share this with someone, and subscribe to our channels for future episodes of The Customer Wins. Dave, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Rich. It was a real pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Wins podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.